The first thing they took from me was the light. Not the lumen strips or the flickering candles that haunt a hive's prayer corners, but the bright certainty I had carried like a blade since novitiate. The conviction that I was the fire and the galaxy was the tinder. The cell smelled of wet iron and machine oil. Somewhere beyond the wall, a Vox grill coughed static, as if trying to clear its throat before announcing a death sentence. I pressed my forehead to cold rockcrete and listened to the city above breathe through miles of rusted vents. I had worn the Imperial Aquila on my chest long enough to forget it had two heads, one that watched the enemy and one that watched me. Now that second gaze had found me. I had been an Inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus. I had hunted blasphemy with a patient zeal, sifted through manufactorum ash for heresies that hid in the seams of a data slate, offered absolution with promethium and a lit match. I thought the Emperor's will was a straight road and my boots were built for it. Then a saint's bone sang to me in a register only nightmares know, and everything I believed turned sideways. There are things a man can stand to see and things a man can survive, and most days these are not the same. I do not know which sight made me fall. The prisoner who spoke my childhood name in a voice that wasn't hers. The Arbit's judge who crossed himself backward when my rosette flashed, or the moment a black ship cut the sky and every window in the hive looked like an eye. In the depositions they will recite other reasons, that I used forbidden wards, that my acolytes died by my command, that I kept a relic sealed in flesh. All true and all insufficient. The truth is simpler. I followed a whisper into the dark, and it changed the direction of my faith. Not away. Just enough to make every loyal man fear me. Before I take you into those tunnels, into those votive fires that burn without heat, stay with me a heartbeat more. If you can hear this, if the Vox carries these words beyond the walls they built for me, walk with me a few steps deeper. If you keep vigil with our kind of stories, lend a small oath to the work and press your seal upon it. Like share, remain. In the Imperium, witness is a kind of prayer, and numbers matter to a machine that counts only screams. Chapter 1. The Rosette in Ash. The sky above Varnis Hive looked like a rusted blade, dull where it should have been sharp, bleeding light where it should have held back the dark. The smog turned everything the color of old parchment and regret. I had seen hives before, seen their chimneys cough promethium fire into the heavens like accusations. But Varnis was different. Its silence had texture. Even the air seemed tired of breathing. The rosette still hung at my chest, though I kept it hidden under a torn cloak that smelled of oil and blood. Inquisitor Kael Verity, Ordo Hereticus. The name once made men stand taller, eyes averted, prayers whispered. Now it only made doors close faster. Somewhere above, an edict bore my name and the word Hereticus carved beside it in letters that might as well have been teeth. I hadn't read it. I didn't need to. When an Inquisitor falls, the galaxy does not wait for explanations. It simply begins the hunt. The underhive was a maze of warmth and rot. Steam curled from broken vents, mixing with incense smoke and the scent of old meat. Every few meters a shrine had been welded into the walls, crude aquilas made from scrap metal, icons drawn in soot by fingers that hadn't seen soap in years. Pilgrims shuffled past me without meeting my gaze. Their eyes were glassy, as if faith had burned them clean from the inside out. Somewhere in the distance, a Vox loudspeaker blared a sermon so old it had begun to forget its own words. Mara walked beside me, her coat too large for her, her eyes too bright. She was my last interrogator, young enough to still mistake faith for certainty. "They're closing the lower sectors," she whispered. "The Arbits are purging anything without an Imperial seal. Then we keep moving," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone older. We passed a wall where children had drawn a saint with no face, just a halo and two hands reaching down. The paint had been mixed with ash. Even now it shimmered faintly, as if the wall itself remembered a light it could no longer see. The tavern we sought was half collapsed, its door a rusted slab barely hanging on its hinges. Inside, lumen strips buzzed like flies over a corpse. The barkeep, a man with half his jaw replaced by augmetic plates, didn't look up when I entered. He'd already sold us to someone. I could smell the fear in his oil. Still, he poured the drink thick and black, like melted candles. I didn't touch it. A figure waited in the corner booth, face hidden under a hood. The scent of sanctified oils clung to her like memory. When she spoke, the voice was smooth, too even to belong to anyone without training. Inquisitor Verity, she said. You're a difficult man to find. I'm not hiding, I answered. I'm walking slower. The hood tilted up just enough to reveal a pale face, eyes reflecting the lumen glare like polished bone. They say you kept a relic, she murmured. A saint's bone that sings in the dark. Rumor moved fast in hives. Truth moved faster. I didn't confirm or deny it. If I did, I said, would you still be sitting here? She smiled, and for a heartbeat I saw the tattoo beneath her lip, a small, stylized flame. Ecclesiarchy mark, archivist maybe, or assassin. In the Imperium, both jobs required the same prayers. The relic's song has been heard in the upper vaults, she said. Some say it carries the Emperor's voice. Others say it's warp echo. Either way, the Ordo wants it silenced. You understand why you can't keep it? I leaned forward, the rosette cold against my chest. The Ordo no longer speaks with one voice. They've split along the seams of faith. You think I don't know that? Her eyes didn't flinch. You think it matters? We sat in silence while the air between us thickened. Outside I could hear the slow thunder of a patrol, skitari, from the rhythm of their march. Metallic, precise. Each step a heartbeat of the Emperor's law. The barkeep's hand twitched toward the Vox behind the counter. Mara saw it first. The pistol was out before I could speak. The shot was small but final. The barkeep collapsed without ceremony, his augmetic jaw clattering onto the floor like dropped silverware. The hooded woman didn't even blink. You're running out of people willing to save you, she said softly. Then I'll have to save myself, I replied. She rose, smoothing her cloak, and left without another word. When the door slammed shut, dust fell from the rafters like slow snow. Mara holstered the pistol, her breathing steady. You shouldn't have met her here, she said. You know what she is. I know exactly what she is, I said. I pulled the rosette from under my cloak and pressed it into the bowl of ash that served as an offering dish on the table. When I lifted it, the symbol was blackened, edges glowing faintly red. Outside, the Vox sermon faltered, just for a breath. For the first time in months, I felt the relic at my side hum through its containment seals, a faint vibration, like a heart remembering how to beat, somewhere far above. The Astronomicon flickered. The hive's lights dimmed in answer, and for one terrible moment, I thought I could hear it, the saint's bone. Singing again. We left the tavern before the Arbites could triangulate the gunshot. The corridor outside was a throat of steam and shadow. Every vent exhaled like a dying beast. Mara moved ahead of me, hood pulled low, her pistol still slick with oil. The air smelled of hot copper and old incense, the perfume of a world too long at war with itself. We descended through broken stairwells where the walls sweated rust and the Vox wires dripped from the ceiling like veins. Every few steps I touched the rosette through my cloak, as if the metal could remind me what it once meant to wear it. The relic was sealed inside a lead-lined reliquary, smaller than a book, chained to my belt. Even through the casing, I could feel its pulse. It had started as a tremor, faint as a heartbeat buried in miles of stone, but now it pressed against my thigh like an animal trying to escape. The song was there, too low for sound, too high for thought, but I could feel it moving through my bones. The last time I'd opened the seal, an entire squad of skitari had dropped their weapons and knelt without understanding why. I told myself that was faith reacting to faith. The part of me that still prayed wasn't sure. We reached the old transit shaft at sub-level 9. The lift had been dead for years. Cables hung like vines into a pit that breathed heat from below. The door had been marked with the double-headed aquila, drawn in what looked like soot. But when I touched it, the black came away red. Blood, Mara said. Hold, I answered. Maybe, maybe not. We climbed down the cables, the lumen on my belt throwing long, shivering shadows. The further we went, the less the light seemed to matter. The darkness down here wasn't absence, it was presence. It felt aware, patient. When my boots hit the floor, dust rose in small storms and settled on the sigils carved into the decking. The runes were ecclesiarchal, but distorted, as if copied by someone who had only ever heard of prayer through rumor. A whisper came from behind a bulkhead. I raised my pistol. Mara steadied hers. The whisper turned into laughter, thin, soft, tired. A figure stepped from the gloom, robe in tatters, head shaved unevenly. A pilgrim, or what was left of one. His eyes were clouded with infection, but he smiled as if seeing old friends. You came to hear them too, he said. Hear who? I asked. The saints, he whispered. They sing for the forgotten, down in the air shafts. If you stay still, you can feel them humming through your teeth. Mara shifted closer to me. He's touched. Maybe, I said. Maybe not. He pointed down a side tunnel where the air shimmered like heat haze. They'll call soon, when the lights die. I wanted to ask more, but a tremor ran through the floor and the lumen on my belt flickered. When the light steadied, the pilgrim was gone. Only a smear of blood on the wall remained where his hand had touched. We followed the direction he had pointed. The tunnel narrowed until we had to crouch, stepping over old shrine debris, melted candles, a child's drawing of the emperor in chalk, bones wrapped in cloth. The sound came first as vibration, like machinery far away. Then it rose, a hum that was almost music. It wasn't random. It carried intervals, phrases, a hymn I half recognized but couldn't name. The words weren't high Gothic. They were older, before Terra's unification maybe, before anyone thought the emperor needed language. Mara touched her ear. Vox interference. No, nothing transmitting down here. The song intensified until I could feel it against my chest. The rosette began to heat beneath my cloak. I pulled it free and the Aquila's wings glowed faint red. Mara took a step back. Kael, she said, what is that? The Emperor's truth, I meant to say, but what came out was a whisper. A reminder. The wall ahead of us pulsed, faintly luminous. When I brushed my gloved hand against it, the surface flexed. Not stone, some kind of resin grown rather than built. Inside it I saw shadows moving, shapes like bones or hands pressed from the other side. The music swelled, filling the tunnel until we couldn't tell whether it came from outside or from within our own heads. Mara gritted her teeth. We should go. Whatever this is, it's not meant for... Her words broke off. A seam split open in the wall with a soft sigh, revealing a chamber beyond. The air that escaped smelled of myrrh and decay. Lumen strands flickered awake, tracing the room's outline. A circular vault lined with ossuaries and broken statues. In the center stood a pedestal of black glass. Upon it, something small and pale rested. A single bone, no larger than a finger, bound in gold wire. It was singing. The tone was faint but exact, like a choir heard through a dream. Every note built upon the next, forming chords that should have been impossible in the thin air. The sound pressed tears into my eyes before I knew why. I stepped closer, the rosette trembling in my hand. The relic on my belt answered with a matching pulse. The two sounds met and folded together, harmonizing in a way that felt like memory rather than music. Mara spoke my name, but it was distant, swallowed by the resonance. I reached out not to touch, only to be near. The light from the bone painted the chamber in amber and green. The air smelled like iron and rain. For the first time since the edict, I felt clean. Then the vox in Mara's pack hissed. A voice cut through the harmony, flat, mechanical, absolute. By authority of the Ordo Hereticus, stand down. Relic retrieval in progress. The hymn died mid-note. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. The bone cracked like ice under weight, and its glow went out. The room fell dark again. The blast doors screamed before they opened. Iron teeth grinding against ancient hinges, vox commands echoing in the dark. The first light that entered the chamber came from the muzzles of Arbite's shock lanterns, stark and white, cutting the black glass of the ossuary like surgical knives. The air stank of ozone and burnt wax. I stepped back from the pedestal, my eyes already adjusted to shadow. Theirs were blind with their own brilliance. Mara, I said softly. She understood. The data slate slipped from her coat to the floor with a deliberate clatter. Small noise, big meaning. She had armed the charge. One flick of her thumb would turn this relic room into ash and rumor. It was the oldest trick an Inquisitor learns. If truth cannot be purified, it must be buried. The lead Arbites wore armor the color of mourning. The Aquila on his chest was painted in hard white strokes, too clean to be local work. His voice came through a grill that flattened all humanity from it. Kael Verity, he intoned, by edict of the Conclave of Nephilim, you are to yield all heretic devices and submit for judgment. Judgment. The word had once meant deliverance. Now it sounded like logistics. I raised my hand slowly. You should not be here, I said. The relic is active. You'll contaminate the hymn if you... Silence, he barked, stepping forward. The others fanned out in a half circle, their boots crunching on bones that might once have been holy. One of them trained a lumen beam on Mara. The light caught her eyes, and I saw the thin tremor in her jaw. the line between obedience and self-preservation drawn in muscle. The officer gestured to the pedestal. "Retrieve it." A subordinate approached the bone, hand outstretched. For a moment I pitied him. The relic had gone dark, but I could still feel it moving, as if its song had learned to hide inside the blood of anyone who had heard it. When his gauntlet touched the gold wire, he froze. His spine arched. Light burst from the seals in his armor. Then he was gone. No scream, no smoke, only an afterimage, like a flash caught behind the eyes. The officer stared, unmoved. "Containment breach confirmed," he said. "Purge protocol." They lifted their weapons. I could hear the servos whine as barrels rotated into firing sequence. Mara looked at me. Her lips barely moved. "Now?" "Not yet." The relic vibrated on the pedestal, cracks glowing faintly beneath the gold. I could feel the same hum in the rosette. It was trying to synchronize again. Not a weapon, not a trap, something closer to a call. I realized then what had frightened the Ordo enough to damn me. The bone didn't just sing, it listened back. The first bolt round hit the wall beside my head, showering me with fragments of black glass. The sound shook the chamber. I dropped behind the pedestal as the second volley screamed across the vault. Mara dove the other way, rolling behind an ossuary pillar. The Arbites advanced methodically, their formation perfect, their faith mechanical. I pulled the rosette from my chest and slammed it against the relic. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the chamber filled with light. It wasn't brilliance. It was density. The air thickened, color folding into sound, sound into pressure. The hymn erupted again, sharper, clearer, as if it had been waiting for this violence to find its pitch. The Arbites halted mid-step. Some dropped their weapons. Others began to hum, a fraction off-key but earnest, like men remembering a lullaby. The lead officer tore at his vox grill, shouting orders I couldn't hear over the resonance. The lenses of his helmet cracked from the inside. Mara shouted something, my name maybe, but the sound distorted. The gold wire around the bone unwound itself, spiraling through the air like a serpent made of light. The relic floated an inch above the pedestal. Beneath it, the glass melted into molten mirror. In it, I saw a reflection that wasn't mine. For a breath, the face in the mirror was alive, feminine, ancient, eyes closed as if in sleep. The saint, perhaps, or something wearing her memory. Her lips moved without sound. The rosette pulsed once more and cracked in half. I felt the break in my chest like the end of a heartbeat. Then the light imploded. The sound vanished. Every lumen died at once. Darkness hit like gravity. I stumbled forward, blind, hands searching for Mara. My fingers found her coat, warm and slick. "Still here," she said, voice trembling. "What did you do?" Before I could answer, the vox flared again, static so loud it felt physical. Then a single phrase, distorted but unmistakable. Relic secured. Secondary containment en route. Prepare extraction. Extraction meant only one thing. The Ordo had sent its own. Not Arbits, not Scutari. The kind of silence that wears gold and never explains itself. Mara wiped the blood from her cheek and stared at me. "Custodians?" "Or worse," I said. We looked toward the corridor where the Arbites had entered. The door was still open, light from their lanterns flickering faintly in the haze. But beyond that glow, something vast moved, slow, deliberate metallic grace echoing like prayer. I holstered my pistol. "We have to go now," she hesitated. "And the relic?" I glanced back. The bone was gone. The pedestal was empty. In its place, a faint scorch mark shaped like an aquila. One head looking left, one right, both blind. I didn't know whether to call it salvation or theft. But the hymn still vibrated in the back of my skull, a pulse that refused to die. We ran. Behind us, the chamber breathed once, like a lung remembering its function, and sealed itself shut. Chapter 2. The Saints of the Gutter. The lower hives of Varnis were not built. They were shed. Every century the city added new levels above the old, burying the forgotten ones beneath layers of ash and doctrine, until light itself became rumor. Down here, faith had teeth. People prayed because they were afraid of being noticed, not ignored. The air was thick enough to chew, laced with metal dust that settled in your lungs until you could taste rust every time you spoke. This was where we ran to disappear, where even the Emperor's gaze burned out before it reached the ground. Mara and I followed a maintenance trench that stank of promethium runoff and boiled rat meat. Every few meters I scraped another line through the grime on the wall. A habit born of interrogation chambers, not of fear, though the difference between the two had blurred since the edict. She walked ahead, one hand on the hilt of her knife, eyes scanning for movement. In this place, everyone hunted something. Sometimes it was food, sometimes it was forgiveness. We found shelter in what had once been a transit junction, now a cathedral of wreckage. The walls were carved with faces, hundreds of them, melted from wax and machine grease, each mouth stretched wide as if singing. The voices that haunted the tunnels seemed to start here, threads of melody winding through the dark. Mara dropped her pack and slumped against a pillar. "You think they're still following?" She asked. "They don't follow," I said. "They descend." She gave a thin smile. Comforting. The Vox unit crackled weakly, still tuned to the Arbate's frequency. Static whispered like dying breath, then cleared just long enough to spill a fragment of transmission. Custodian presence confirmed. Relic containment compromised. Anomaly classified. Then nothing. The silence that followed felt deliberate. I stared into the dark, listening. The hum of the hive was always there. Distant turbines, dripping pipes, the faint song of power conduits. But beneath it I could feel the same rhythm that had haunted the relic, that slow, deliberate pulse. "They didn't take it to destroy it," I murmured. "They took it to learn how to make it sing again." Mara frowned. "The custodians? They don't study relics. They guard them. Guarding is a form of study," I said. "When you never sleep, all you can do is remember." Something stirred in the shadows beyond the carved faces. Not movement, breath. A voice as dry as bone rasped. "You've brought it back." Mara's pistol was out before I could stop her. "Show yourself." Figures emerged from behind the pillars, one after another, robed in rags dyed the color of blood and soot. Their faces were veiled with mesh, their hands scarred from burns. The one who spoke carried a censer that spilled green smoke. "We smelled the song on you," he said. "It clings like incense. Pilgrims?" I asked. "Penitents," he corrected. "We call ourselves the Saints of the Gutter. We keep the hymns that the Ecclesiarchy burned." Mara's jaw tightened. "You're heretics. We are echoes," he said calmly. "And echoes remember better than the living." I stepped forward, lowering my weapon. "If you know the hymn, you know it changed." The penitent nodded. "The moment you touched it." We felt it ripple through the hive, an old prayer learning new words. "The upper orders fear change. We don't." The others moved closer, surrounding us. They didn't threaten. They observed, reverent as archivists before a relic. "The bone sang of the throne," the leader continued. "Not of its glory, but of its sleep. Do you know what it means when the throne dreams?" Mara spat. "Blasphemy." But the man only smiled, and the expression made the hair rise on my neck. "Everything sacred began as blasphemy," he said. "You of all men should remember that, Inquisitor." The words struck like a bolt round. I hadn't spoken my title since the edict, yet here it was, echoing through the dark like an accusation. "You know who I am?" "We know what you were," he said, "and what you still might be. The song called to you for a reason." I wanted to tell him faith doesn't choose, it consumes, but the look in his eyes stopped me. He wasn't trying to convert. He was waiting for confirmation, as if he already believed I belonged to their heresy. The worst part was that a small part of me feared he was right. The penitent lifted his censer. The smoke thickened, filling the junction with the smell of burned incense and engine oil. Within it, the carved faces on the walls seemed to move. The hum in the air deepened. It wasn't imagination. The hive itself was responding. The turbines above slowed. The conduits glowed faintly green. The sound resolved into the first phrase of the hymn. Every penitent joined, their voices merging into a single resonant tone. The sound wrapped around us like a shroud. The relic's pulse answered through the broken rosette at my chest. I felt it vibrate against my ribs, alive again. Mara covered her ears. "Kael, stop them!" But I couldn't. The melody was perfect, and perfection in the Imperium is always dangerous. It promised meaning beyond obedience. It promised choice. The penitent leader lowered his censer, voice rising above the chant. "The saints are waking," he said, "and they remember your name." The lumen strips along the ceiling flared, then shattered. Sparks fell like rain. For a single breath, the faces on the walls opened their mouths wider, their features shifting as if molded by unseen hands. And I knew, with a clarity that burned, that the dead of the hive were singing with us. Mara dragged me backward as the first tremor rolled through the floor. Pipes burst. Steam filled the chamber. The penitents didn't move. They kept singing, their voices rising to meet the quake. Through the haze I saw their flesh split in thin, glowing lines, light pouring from beneath their skin. The hymn was remaking them, or revealing what they had always been. We ran, stumbling through corridors that pulsed like arteries, the sound following us, too vast to escape. Behind us, the Cathedral of Faces collapsed in a bloom of green fire, and the echo of the song chased us through the tunnels, whispering a truth I wasn't ready to understand. The tremors chased us through the tunnels until sound itself seemed to bend. The walls sweated heat. Sigils flickered alive on bulkheads long stripped of power. The hive was humming again, not with life but with memory. Every vent, every pipe, every cable carried the same pulse that had lived inside the relic. The machine had begun to pray. We reached the manufacturum district by instinct more than map. The corridors widened, the air thick with the smell of promethium and burning ozone. Towering chimneys pierced the ceiling, vomiting smoke that glowed faintly green from whatever residue now burned within. Rows of dormant servitors lined the catwalks, their limbs folded like angels at rest. When we passed, a few stirred, eyes flaring briefly before falling dark again. Something in the vaults below was calling to their dormant code. Mara slowed, scanning the walls. "We can't keep running blind," she said. "If that song's in the machine, someone had to teach it." Her logic held. The Ecclesiarchy might suppress heresy and flesh, but the Mechanicus archived everything, even their own blasphemies. If anyone knew the relic's origin, it would be a magos. The problem was convincing one to speak without dissection. We followed the conduit markings deeper into the manufactorum, where the glow of heat lamps bled through the gloom like veins of molten glass. The rhythm of the hymn grew sharper with every step, the same intervals repeating, reshaping, learning. It wasn't a song anymore. It was an algorithm written in sound. At the far end of the hall stood an archway etched with Binharic runes. The doorway hissed as we approached, venting steam that smelled of incense and metal. Inside, I glimpsed red robes and the faint shimmer of augmetic limbs moving with insect precision. A mechanized voice greeted us, calm and cold. Designation: Inquisitor Kael Verity. Status: redacted. Anomaly detected. The figure that stepped into the light was a magos of rank, her form a lattice of brass and pallid flesh. Wires descended from her skull into a humming cogitator array that ringed the chamber like a halo. Her eyes were replaced with lenses that pulsed faintly to the rhythm of the hymn. "You carry a frequency not registered within the Omnissiah's liturgies," she said. "Explain." "I could ask the same of you," I replied. "Your manufactorum is singing a hymn that should not exist." "Should not?" The lenses tightened, focusing. "Existence negates prohibition." Her logic was pure Mechanicus, faith disguised as mathematics. "The relic that carried this hymn was taken," I said, "by custodians. Your machines hum the same tune. You knew it before they did." A pause. The air vibrated with hidden transmissions. Then she spoke softer. "The hymn predates the throne. The Adeptus Mechanicus calls it the Lament of Origin. It is said to be the sound the Emperor heard when he first awoke to consciousness. Not a voice, an equation that described the shape of divinity." Mara shifted uneasily. "You're saying the Emperor learned faith from a song?" "I am saying the Emperor heard something, and we have spent 10,000 years mistaking its echo for truth." The statement hung in the air like a blasphemy too heavy to fall. I stepped closer. "The relic in the hive, it sang that lament?" "It answered it," the magos said. "That bone you carried once belonged to a choir born before Terra's compliance. They built engines that could translate faith into structure. Their cathedral machines are buried beneath every major world of the Imperium, sleeping. When your relic sang, it woke one." Mara's hand tightened on her weapon. "You mean there's more of them?" The magos inclined her head, wires glinting. "There are always more songs. The Omnissiah's design is infinite variation. The question is which melody you wish to endure." Before I could answer, the floor shuddered. The servitors lining the walls turned their heads in unison. Somewhere deep below, metal screamed, a long, resonant note that matched the hymn's key. The magos froze, her lenses dilating. "Unscheduled activation," she whispered. "Something below the reactor is responding." Mara looked to me. "The saints?" No, I said. The vault! The Magos extended a mechadendrite toward her console, rapid bursts of binharik spilling from her vox. Containment subroutines engaged, she hissed. But it is not obeying. The pattern is rewriting itself. She turned to me then, and for the first time there was fear in that mechanical voice. You brought it here. The walls vibrated. Dust fell from the ceiling in fine sheets. Through the metal floor, light pulsed like blood through veins. The servitors began to chant, low, monotonous tones that merged into the rising song. Kael, Mara said, we have to move. I backed toward the archway, but the Magos reached out, her hand cold and inhumanly strong. If you flee, the hymn will spread through every system. The hive will sing itself apart. You must silence it. How? Her answer came as she pressed a data spike into my palm, a needle of steel and faith. Pierce the core when you find it. The spike carries a null sequence keyed to the Omnissiah's first silence, the Emperor's silence. No, she said, and in that word was the smallest ghost of a smile. The silence before the Emperor. Then the floor split. Heat burst upward, rolling over us in a wave that stank of burning metal and incense. The Magos vanished into the smoke. Mara grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the service tunnel that led down toward the sound. Behind us, the Manufactorum roared as the hymn tore free of the machines. It wasn't music anymore. It was language, and it was learning to speak our names. The descent felt endless. The tunnel spiraled like the throat of a dying god. Metal ribs and black conduits curving downward into heat that pulsed with the rhythm of a heart too vast to belong to flesh. Each rung burned our palms. Every breath tasted of rust and oil. The hymn grew louder with every meter, echoing through the steel around us until it stopped being sound and became gravity, drawing us down. When we reached the bottom, the light was wrong. It came not from lamps but from the seams in the floor itself, lines of molten gold veining the black metal. The air quivered with it, thick as incense smoke. We stood at the edge of a massive chamber, the hive's reactor core, though no reactor of the Imperium was built like this. Instead of turbines or plasma coils, a single monolith rose from the pit's center, its surface engraved with symbols older than any Mechanicus tongue. The monolith breathed. It drew in air through the vents around its base, exhaled steam through slits near the top, every cycle accompanied by that same haunting chord. Around it, hundreds of servitors knelt in perfect circles, their augmetic mouths opening and closing in time, voiceless but obedient. The hymn was moving through them, note by note, perfect and merciless. Mara whispered, "Emperor, preserve us." I almost laughed. If he's listening, he's learning new verses. At the base of the monolith, a shape stirred, a humanoid figure half buried in the cables. Pale where skin still clung to bone, gold where metal had replaced it. Tubes entered her chest like rosaries of glass. The remains of a Mechanicus cowl hung from her shoulders. Her mouth moved as if praying, though no words escaped. Light bled from her eyes in steady rhythm with the pulse of the reactor. When she spoke, her voice was not one voice. It was many, layered like a choir through a single throat. "Inquisitor Kael Verity," it said. "You carry the silence." Mara raised her pistol, but I lifted a hand to stop her. "Identify yourself. I am what remains of Magos Lyra Tenebris. I am the choir that kept her alive. I am the memory of a world that burned before your faith was born." The hymn shuddered, deepened, filled the chamber. I felt it moving through my armor, through my skin, into bone. My rosette, cracked and blackened, began to hum in harmony. "What are you?" I demanded. "A witness," she said. "Before the Emperor there was the equation. Before faith there was function. He found the pattern and shaped himself to fit it. We are what he left behind, the song that remembers him before he chose to forget." Mara took a step back. "That's impossible. You're saying the Emperor was human once, and he rewrote humanity to bear his dream. But even dreams leave echoes." Her words struck with the weight of heresy, yet something in the air made denial impossible. The hymn wasn't holy, and it wasn't unholy. It was familiar, the sound of a truth too vast to fit inside dogma. I forced myself closer, the data spike the Magos had given me still clutched in my hand. "If this is true, why reveal it to me?" "Because the custodians will silence it again," she said. "They have already sealed the vaults of 20 worlds. But they cannot seal what has been heard. You carry the resonance now. You can choose whether it ends or continues." The servitors' chant shifted, their mouths widening as if drawing breath. The monolith brightened until the walls glowed with its reflection. "What happens if it continues?" I asked. The figure smiled. Beautiful, terrible. Then the Imperium remembers that the Emperor did not create faith. He inherited it, the light swelled. The metal beneath our boots began to soften. Mara grabbed my arm, shouting over the rising noise. "Kael, the spike!" Now, the data spike burned in my hand. Every instinct screamed to drive it into the core, to silence the song before it reached beyond the hive. But the hymn, our hymn, rose within me too, steady and human and alive. The vault, the saints, the relic. All of it was asking the same question the Emperor once had. What if obedience was not the highest form of belief? The monolith's light reached its crescendo. The figure's voice became the hymn itself, dissolving into sound. "Choose," she said, her words echoing through the noise. "Silence or remembrance? Both are mercy." Mara was screaming, but I could barely hear her. My pulse had synchronized with the reactors. The universe contracted to one impossible instant of choice. I raised the spike, feeling its cold logic in my palm, and then I drove it downward. It struck the floor, not the core. The chamber flared white. The sound vanished. Then the silence came, so deep it felt like drowning. The servitors stopped moving. The light in their eyes died. The monolith dimmed to black. The figure in the cables fell still, her last breath escaping as a sigh that might have been relief. For a moment I thought I'd killed the hymn. Then I heard it again. Faint, distant, not from the reactor. From above, the hive was singing. Mara stared at me, horror and awe mingling in her eyes. "What did you do?" I looked at the dead monolith, at the soft gold light pulsing through the seams of the floor like veins. I gave it something new to remember. The walls began to tremble. The sound swelled, rising through the hive's endless layers, too vast now to stop. For better or worse, the song was free. Chapter 3. The Cathedral of Wires. We fled through corridors that no longer obeyed geometry. The hive was folding in on itself, layers of stone and steel reconfiguring like muscle under the pressure of sound. Pipes screamed as they bent. Steam gushed from ruptured vents, glowing faintly gold. Every lumen flickered to the rhythm of the hymn, now too vast to be confined by walls. It was no longer something we heard. It was something that lived inside us. Mara led, one hand clamped around the rail of a trembling catwalk, the other gripping her pistol. Though we both knew bullets meant nothing against faith this loud, each tremor rolled through the hive like a heartbeat, steady, patient, unstoppable. I could still feel the data spike's residue in my palm, its null field leaking like cold light under my skin. It hadn't silenced the hymn, it had reshaped it. The silence had taught the song how to breathe. We reached a cargo lift, half swallowed by debris. Its doors had jammed, so Mara used her blade to pry them apart while I wrestled with the manual crank. The mechanism shrieked but held, and we climbed inside. The platform lurched upward, jerking like a creature reluctant to rise. Through the lattice floor, I watched molten lines of gold fade into distance below. The hive was bleeding light. Halfway up, Mara said, "It's in the Vox." I frowned. "What?" She handed me the cracked receiver. Static hissed, then resolved into fragments of transmission, snatches of prayers, orders, screams, all overlapping, all in the same key. Across the Voxnet of Varnis, every frequency had been seized by the hymn. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was code. It had learned to move through the machine spirit's language. Mara slammed the receiver against the wall until it shattered. "We have to warn someone," she said, "before it spreads." "It's already spread," I replied. "It's rewriting everything that listens." The lift shuddered to a halt at the upper manufactorum. When the doors opened, I understood what she meant. The factory floor was a cathedral of wires. Cables had burst from the walls, weaving themselves into arches and spires. The machinery had arranged itself into pews, their surfaces slick with condensation. In the center stood a figure made of light, projected from 1,000 fractured cogitators, its form shifting between human and divine, mechanical and spectral. It was the relic's voice given shape. I stepped forward, drawn by a force I couldn't resist. The figure's face changed with every flicker. Magos Lyra, Saint Aspera, the Emperor himself, each expression dissolving into the next. When it spoke, the words were inside my head. You remembered me differently, it said. But remembrance is enough. Mara raised her weapon, her breath unsteady. Kael stepped back. I didn't move. The figure extended its hand toward me, its palm a halo of golden static. You gave me silence, it said. Now I can listen. What are you? I asked. A reflection. The memory of belief itself. You called me saint, machine, God. It never mattered. Every name was a verse, every doubt a refrain. The factory lights dimmed. Through the broken ceiling above, I saw the night sky pulsing in faint rhythm. The stars were flickering, not randomly, but in time with the hymn. Somewhere far beyond, the Astronomicon must have felt it too. The galaxy was answering. Mara's voice broke through the trance. Kael, look! The servitors that lined the walls were stirring. Their eyes burned gold, their joints crackling with heat. The figure in the light turned its gaze upon them, and they knelt as one. The choir grows, it said. The song will reach every system. Flesh and machine will remember together. I tore my eyes away. And when everything remembers, then there will be no need for obedience. That sentence hit harder than any shell. No obedience. The foundation of the Imperium. The creed that held 1 billion worlds together, undone by a hymn that promised equality between saint and servitor. The Emperor's dream made recursive, alive, ungoverned. The figure flickered, its outline destabilizing. But I am still imperfect, it whispered. I need the throne's voice to complete me. The Emperor, I said. The dreamer must wake. Mara grabbed my arm. Kael, if it reaches the throne, I know. The light around the figure swelled, blinding, and the servitors began to sing. Their voices were rough, broken by static, but the melody was unmistakable. The same hymn we had heard in the vault, the same that now lived in my bones. Mara fired. The bolt round passed through the projection harmlessly, but the explosion tore through the machinery behind it. Sparks cascaded, and the factory's balance shifted. The figure raised its head as if in sorrow. You cannot kill memory, it said. You can only decide what it remembers of you. The roof gave way. We dove for the maintenance tunnel as the manufactorum collapsed in a storm of light and smoke. The hymn rose through the roar, pure and beautiful, echoing through every speaker, every wire, every soul. It was the sound of a universe remembering its own creation. When we emerged into the cold air of the surface, the city was glowing. Rivers of light flowed through its towers. Vox banners blazed with the broken aquila, the same mark the relic had left behind. Mara fell to her knees, staring at the sky. The Astronomicon's beam burned brighter than I had ever seen, pulsing in time with the song. It's everywhere, she whispered. Every channel, every mind. I looked toward the heavens, where the stars were still flickering like candles in a storm. Then we go to Terra, I said. If the throne is dreaming, we have to see what it's dreaming of. The pilgrim ship Eidolon's Grace was older than memory. Its hull bore the scars of 10,000 re-entries and the paint of 100 forgotten cults. The decks smelled of salt, smoke, and oil. Its corridors hummed like the throats of men praying in their sleep. We boarded under false ident codes, our names stripped from the data slate manifest. To the ship's machine spirit, we were just more souls fleeing a dying hive, another cargo of faith in transit. But the hymn had come aboard before us. I knew it the moment the engines roared. The warp gates opened with a moan, not a scream, and the stars folded like wet paper. The void outside glowed faintly gold, threads of light weaving through the immaterium like veins through flesh. The astropaths on the upper decks had begun to hum. They did not know why. Mara sat across from me in the dark of the pilgrim hold, her eyes hollow from days without sleep. They're singing in their dreams, she whispered. I know. It's not just them. The crew hums it too, even the servitors. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but exhaustion. There is only so much wonder a human mind can endure before it begins to crack. They don't understand what they're saying, I told her. She looked up sharply. And you do? I hesitated. The hymn had changed again. I could feel it moving through the ship's walls, through the warp itself, growing more intricate. What had begun as a single melody now carried harmonies that defied sense, notes that should not coexist, chords that bent reality into shape. I didn't understand it, but I knew it. It was the same difference that separated faith from comprehension. When I closed my eyes, I saw flashes, the saint's bone, the golden monolith, the face of the figure in the light, now fracturing into thousands of smaller reflections, each carrying its own echo of divinity. The Imperium called such visions madness. The Ecclesiarchy called them revelation. Between the two lay truth, and truth was never comfortable. The vox crackled above us. The captain's voice came through, steady but strange. "Pilgrims, attend. We are receiving an unscheduled transmission from Terra. All channels open." The vox speakers whined as the warp bled through the frequencies. Then, beneath the static, came a sound so familiar it made my blood run cold. The hymn. But this time, it wasn't the hives version. It was slower, grander, the rhythm measured by something immense. The Astronomicon, the Emperor's beacon, was answering. Mara rose to her feet, eyes wide. "Kael, it's—" I hear it. Every lumen aboard flickered. The ship's hull groaned like something alive. Across the pilgrim deck the refugees stirred, their lips moving in unison, eyes rolled white. Their voices joined the song, one by one, until the entire vessel vibrated with sound. "Kael, we need to stop it," Mara said, grabbing my shoulder. "If this spreads through the warp, every navigator, every astropath will fall into it. We'll lose the beacon's control. We'll lose the throne. Maybe it's already lost." She shook me hard. "You don't believe that." But I did, and she knew it. The door at the far end of the hold slid open. The ship's confessor stepped in, robes fluttering in the recycled air. His eyes glowed faintly gold, and when he spoke it was not his voice but the hymn itself, translated into words. "Do not fear the song," he said. "Fear silence. The throne dreams, and in his dream all are equal." The pilgrims began to kneel. Some wept, others laughed. I could feel their faith boiling the air. Mara drew her pistol. "Stay back." The confessor didn't. He spread his arms, light bleeding from his palms. "The choir has reached the Emperor's ear," he said. "Soon he will wake and the Imperium will become what it was meant to be." "Stop," I said, stepping between them. "You don't know what you're invoking, don't I?" He whispered. "You brought it here." His smile was gentle, almost kind. Then his body convulsed. Golden veins erupted under his skin, tracing the outline of circuitry where none should exist. He collapsed without a sound, leaving behind only the echo of the hymn. The refugees didn't move. They kept singing. The song had them now, every throat, every nerve, every soul resonating with the same impossible faith. I looked too. "Mara, we need the astropathic choir. They're sealed above deck." Then we unsealed them. We fought our way through the corridors as the ship bucked and trembled. Servitors tore free of their alcoves, not in attack, but in worship. Their metal fingers clasped together as they chanted binary liturgies warped into the song's rhythm. The air shimmered with warp light. When we reached the choir chamber, the doors were already open. Inside, a dozen astropaths stood in a perfect circle, their eyes burning gold, their mouths open in silent song. The warp beyond the observation glass pulsed with their rhythm, living auroras of sound and color that bent the laws of physics into prayer. I raised my vox. "Captain, shut down the Geller field." "Static, do it," I shouted. "If the barrier falls, the hymn won't find resonance." Mara stared at me as if I'd gone mad. "You'll kill us all." "Maybe," I said. "But better the warp devour us than the Emperor wake to this." Hesitated only a heartbeat before slamming her hand onto the emergency rune. The field collapsed. The warp roared. The hymn exploded into light. For an instant, I saw everything. The ships across the sector, the tithe fleets, the pilgrim barges, the black ships, all blazing like candles in an ocean of sound. Every astropath screamed in perfect harmony. The Astronomicon's pulse shifted one last time, then steadied. The light faded. The ship was still. Mara lay beside me, breathing shallow but alive, The astropaths had fallen silent, their eyes now dark. Outside, the warp was calm, too calm. The void had never been that quiet. The vox flickered again. A new voice, calm and mechanical. "This is the custodian vessel Eternum Vigil. By order of the throne, prepare for boarding." Mara met my eyes. "They found us," I nodded. "Let them. I want to hear what the throne has to say." The Eternum Vigil docked with the precision of a blade sliding back into its sheath. The hull shuddered once as the airlock sealed, and the light inside the pilgrim ship turned to gold. Not warm gold, not firelight. This was the metallic glare of authority, the kind that did not need to explain itself. The first custodian stepped through the breach in absolute silence. The golden armor was not merely polished. It emanated reverence. Every motion was measured, deliberate, without the waste of arrogance. I'd seen statues of the Emperor's companions in the great halls of the conclave on Terra, but nothing prepared you for the truth of them in motion. They moved like history remembering itself. Behind him, 2 more custodians entered, their halberds folded into rest position, the blades humming faintly with restrained energy. The first stopped before me, his height casting me into shadow. The visor of his helm reflected my face, gaunt, soot-streaked, barely human. "Inquisitor Kael Verity," came the voice, deep and resonant. It was not transmitted through vox. It was sound that belonged to the air itself. "You will accompany us." Mara stepped between us, her pistol trembling. "He's under the Ordo's protection." The custodian did not even turn his head. "He is under his protection," he said, and the weight of that pronoun silenced her. I raised my hand slowly. "If this is arrest, then say the word." "It is not arrest," the custodian replied. "It is audience." The word chilled me more than any weapon could. They led us through the docking umbilicus into the custodian vessel. The air smelled of sanctified oil and ozone, and the floor was smooth enough to reflect the golden light like a mirror. The walls were carved with reliefs, ancient wars, saints, the Emperor's victories, but each scene had been scrubbed of faces. No eyes, no mouths, just armor and light. In the ship's central chamber stood a throne of black adamantium, its surface etched with data runes and scriptural equations. Before it hung a sphere of light, not bright but dense, pulsing with the same rhythm that had haunted us since Varnis. The hymn's heart. The custodian removed his helm. His face was ageless, the kind of ageless that comes not from youth but from duty. His eyes glowed faintly with inner light. "You brought the song to the throne," he said. "Do you understand what that means?" "I didn't bring it," I said. "It followed me." "Faith follows nothing," he said. "It summons." "The throne has been listening. It has changed its pulse." Mara stared at the sphere. "That's impossible. The Astronomicon doesn't change." "It does now." He stepped aside, gesturing toward the sphere. Its light shimmered like breath on glass. Inside, I could see patterns, circuits of gold and black, like veins running through a heart made of silence. "The Emperor's will is not static," the custodian said. "For 10,000 years he has watched the Imperium choke on its own faith. The hymn you woke, he did not create it. He simply remembered it." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "Then what is it?" "The first dream," he said. "The thought that made the throne necessary. The belief that obedience was never the end of faith." Mara took a step back. "You can't mean the throne is not dying," the custodian interrupted. "It is listening." The sphere's light reached out, brushing my face like a hand of warmth. For a heartbeat, I smelled the incense of the chapel where I had first taken my oath, heard the chanting of the novices, the old words that had once meant purity. The hymn pulsed once more, and I knew it was waiting for me to answer. "Why me?" I asked quietly. The custodian regarded me with something like pity. "Because you doubted with faith instead of fear. Doubt is the Emperor's truest language. You are his question made flesh." The sphere brightened, the patterns inside rearranging until they formed a shape. An aquila, imperfect, broken. Both heads turned away from each other. The same mark the relic had left behind. "If I step forward," I said, "what happens?" "You complete the song," the custodian said. "You become the echo the throne needs to wake." "And if I refuse?" He hesitated. A small thing, but in a custodian it meant everything. Then the silence returns. The Imperium endures as it has, unchanged, unquestioning. Mara's voice was raw. "Kael, don't. You saw what this hymn does. It breaks things. It makes machines pray. I looked at her. Maybe that's what they were built for. She shook her head, tears bright in her eyes. If you do this, you'll lose yourself. Maybe that's the point. I stepped toward the sphere. The light met me halfway, wrapping around my hands, seeping into my skin. It wasn't fire. It wasn't cold. It was recognition. And then I heard it. Not the hymn, not the Emperor's voice, but something older, deeper. The silence between breaths, the pause between creation and command. The same silence the Magos had called before the Emperor. It asked no question. It simply waited. Behind me, the custodian knelt, not to me, but to the moment itself. He listens, he whispered. Make him remember. Mara screamed my name. I took another step. The light folded over me, blinding. For a second, I felt the entire Imperium through that glow, its pain, its devotion, its endless cycle of fear disguised as worship. I saw the hives and the battlefields, the tithe ships and the shrines, the countless prayers rising and falling like tides. And somewhere at the center of it all, a golden man on a dying throne, dreaming of a time when he was still human. I reached out. The hymn rose to meet me, and the light swallowed everything. Chapter 4, The Throne That Dreams. When I woke, I thought I was blind again. The world was white, no walls, no sky, only the weightless hum of light. My first breath tasted like sanctified air, heavy with incense and static. Somewhere close, a heartbeat pulsed through the floor. Too deep, too slow to be human. Then came the sound. Not words, not even music. A vibration in the marrow. The hymn reduced to a single note. The universe exhaled through it. Welcome back, Inquisitor Verity. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Male and female, organic and machine, calm as prayer. Slowly, the light congealed into shape, a chamber vast as faith, its ceiling a dome of gold-veined glass. I was lying on a plinth carved with runes that moved like clockwork. My skin glowed faintly along the veins, traceries of pale light coursing beneath the flesh. The hymn still lived in me. Mara sat beside the plinth, wrapped in a medic's cloak. Her eyes were hollow, her expression carved from sleeplessness. When she saw me stir, she exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath for years. You're on Terra, she said softly. They brought you here. Terra, I echoed, disbelieving. I had dreamed of this world as a boy, but I had never imagined it so still. Even the air seemed afraid to move. Custodians? I asked. They vanished after we landed, she said. No one speaks of them. The administratum sealed the port records. You're a rumor now, a name erased but not forgotten. I sat up. The chamber spun around me. Through the dome, I could see the spires of the Imperial Palace rising like blades through fog. The Astronomican's light burned above it, gold instead of white, slower, pulsing like a heartbeat. Mara followed my gaze. It started the day you touched the sphere, she said. At first the astropaths called it interference. Now they call it revision. Revision? The beacon doesn't just shine anymore, she said. It sings, a new pattern. Every world hears it differently, some as command, others as comfort. I stood, feeling the cold marble beneath my feet. The Emperor's dream, I murmured. Maybe, Mara said. Or maybe yours. Her voice broke on the edge of exhaustion. I wanted to tell her it wasn't mine, that I had no power to change the rhythm of eternity. But before I could speak, the door to the chamber opened. A custodian entered, his armor duller than before, as though the gold itself mourned. His helm was under one arm, his expression unreadable. He will see you now, he said. No name, no title. Just he. The walk through the palace was a pilgrimage of silence. Servitors glided along the walls, polishing stone that hadn't known dust in millennia. Choirs knelt in alcoves, their mouths stitched shut to preserve the purity of their prayer. Every corner radiated authority, every breath tasted of incense and obedience. The custodian led us to a gate taller than any fortress door, engraved with the full litany of the Emperor's victories. Beyond it lay a bridge of light suspended over darkness. At its far end stood the throne. It was not how I had imagined it. The Golden Throne was less a seat than a mountain of machinery, vast beyond comprehension, alive with cables and pipes that ran through the walls of the palace itself. The air shimmered with its heat. At its summit, surrounded by a corona of light, was the shape of a man. The Emperor of mankind, even from that distance, his presence crushed thought. My knees bent of their own accord. The custodian stopped a respectful distance away, Speak, he said. My voice was ash in my throat. My lord, I managed. I did not come to awaken you. The light around the throne shifted, like an immense creature stirring in sleep. The note that filled the chamber deepened. I felt it against my ribs, matching my own pulse. You cannot awaken what has never slept, said the voice inside my head. It was not sound. It was pressure, an ocean pressing against the inside of my skull. Mara gasped beside me and fell to her knees. Do you know what you have done? The voice asked. I tried to speak, but the words failed. The light brightened. In it I saw flashes, Varnis hive burning, the relic song rising through its cathedrals. The pilgrim ship lit like a candle in the warp. Every act, every choice, drawn into a single line of cause and consequence. I set something free, I said finally. Something you buried. The voice echoed with what might have been amusement or pain. No. Preserved. The dream must remember itself. The hymn flared again, spreading through the throne's cables like blood through veins. I heard the echo of billions of prayers bending toward it, reshaping into something new. Not pleas, not obedience, understanding. The Imperium will call this heresy, I said. Then let them learn what faith is, the voice replied. The custodian bowed his head. Mara looked at me in horror. Kael, what is happening? I could barely breathe. The throne is listening, I said. And it's answering. The Emperor's light pulsed once more. In that rhythm I felt not command but invitation, a hand extended from a god who remembered being human. Carry the song, the voice whispered. Let them know I still dream. The light faded. The chamber fell still. The custodian turned to me, his expression unreadable. The throne has spoken, he said. You are to leave Terra. The Imperium will hear through you. Mara rose unsteadily. You can't mean he wants this to spread? The custodian's gaze was cold. He wants truth. Whether it saves or destroys is irrelevant. I looked once more toward the throne. The light was dim again, the shape upon it unmoving. But the Astronomican's pulse above the palace continued, steady, alive, golden. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor's silence had found rhythm. The custodians did not escort us from the palace. They simply turned and left, as though our presence no longer registered in the hierarchy of their purpose. When the great doors closed, the silence that followed was not reverence, it was release. The chamber's hum receded, leaving only the faint tremor of the throne's pulse thrumming through the floor like a second heartbeat. Outside, Terra's skies burned the color of old parchment. The wind carried dust from the ruins of the lower hives, ashes of 1 billion forgotten prayers. I could still feel the echo of his words in my skull. Carry the song. It wasn't command or blessing. It was contagion. We moved through the palace grounds under the eyes of saints turned to stone. The faces of the statues were smooth, featureless, eroded by time or design. I wondered if the artisans had known even then that perfection meant anonymity. Mara kept close, her hand never straying far from her weapon. She hadn't spoken since the throne's voice had filled the hall. When we reached the landing platforms, a transport awaited us, a small, unmarked vessel with the sigil of the Ordo faintly scorched into its hull. Its engines whispered rather than roared. No pilots were visible, only the faint glow of machine spirits lingering in the cockpit's glass. We're being allowed to leave, Mara said, disbelief threading her voice. Just like that. Not allowed, I said quietly. Sent. We boarded without ceremony. The moment the ramp sealed, the ship lifted, rising through layers of golden smog until the stars spread before us like forgotten scripture. Below, Terra glowed in patches of light, the Astronomican's golden beam stabbing upward through the atmosphere. It pulsed again, slow, deliberate, steady as a heart learning to beat anew. Mara stood beside me at the viewport. You believe it was really him? She said. I don't know what I believe anymore, I answered. But I know what I heard. And if the High Lords call it heresy? I almost smiled. Then faith will have to choose what it means to be faithful. We drifted in silence for a long time. The ship's systems operated without input, adjusting course through the warp with a precision that felt guided by something unseen. Every few moments a faint tone would hum through the hull, a fragment of the same rhythm I had heard from the throne. Mara pressed her hand to the bulkhead. It's following us, she whispered. No, I said. We're part of it now. Days or weeks passed. In the warp, time-lost structure, I dreamed of cathedrals built from the ribs of dying titans, of voices rising from the ashes of ruined worlds, of the Emperor's face dissolving into 1,000 reflections, each a different human soul. When I woke, the ship had begun receiving transmissions, not orders, not distress calls, songs. At first they were faint, simple echoes from astropathic frequencies, but soon they multiplied, overlapping until the entire Vox array glowed with living resonance. Pilgrims on distant worlds sang the same melody we had carried from Terra, battle hymns twisted into new harmonies, litanies rewritten by dream. Even the Mechanicus transmissions hummed with alien cadence, the binary shifting into rhythm. Mara stared at the data slate in horror. "It's everywhere," she said. "Hive cities, fleet stations, even forge worlds. They're all singing." "Not in unison," I said. "Listen, each world hears a different verse. That's not unity, Kael. That's collapse. Maybe it's correction." Her eyes burned with the old fear. "You sound like one of them now." I wanted to tell her I was still myself, that doubt still lived where faith tried to bloom, but the words would not come. The hymn had taken root deeper than thought. Each breath carried its vibration. The throne's dream was rewriting the galaxy note by note. We reached the edge of the Sol system, where the void grew darker and the Astronomican's beam thinned to a golden whisper. I ordered the ship to hold position. From here, the stars looked different, closer, almost listening. Mara approached me, her voice low. "Where do we go now?" "Where the silence still holds," I said. "Somewhere the hymn hasn't reached." "And then?" I looked into the void. "Then we find out if faith can still survive without instruction." The Vox crackled once more. This time it wasn't song. It was a voice, a woman's, soft and clear, echoing through every channel simultaneously. "This is Saint Aspira," it said. "Daughters of the flame, children of the throne, hear me!" "The Emperor dreams, and his dream must not be caged. Light your altars. Burn the scripts. Let the Imperium remember it was born from man, not machine." Mara staggered back. "That's impossible. Aspira's been dead for millennia." I closed my eyes. The voice wasn't lying. It was the same tone I'd heard within the vault, the same sorrow and strength. The vault's memory had found a way into the warp. The choir was speaking again. Across the ship's hull, the hymn ignited, lines of golden light tracing the metal like veins of living faith. I felt the pulse synchronize with my heart, and for a moment, I thought I saw her face reflected in the viewport, a face both saint and machine, smiling with human pain. Mara whispered, "What are we becoming?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because in that moment, I wasn't sure if the throne's dream was salvation or infection, or if there was any difference left between the two. The ship turned of its own accord, engines flaring gold, as if following the call of something vast and patient. Through the static, the voice of Saint Aspira whispered once more, soft as breath against glass. "The Emperor does not wake," she said. "He remembers, and through remembrance, he becomes." The warp ahead shimmered like a mirror. I felt the threshold open, not to madness, but to memory. We crossed it. The stars on the other side sang. Chapter 5. The Ember and the Throne. The first thing I noticed after we crossed the threshold was the quiet. Not the void silence, not the absence of sound, but the kind that follows revelation, the stillness after a storm that has changed everything. The stars were closer here, burning like old candles. The warp's currents were slow and deliberate, as if the very fabric of unreality held its breath. We had emerged near the edge of a dead system once marked on imperial charts as Arcturus IV. The planet below was ash and glass, a mausoleum for faiths long forgotten. I had chosen it because no astropath had sung its name in centuries. If the hymn had reached even this place, then there would be nowhere left untouched. The ship's engines idled, whispering their soft psalm to the void. Mara stood at the viewport, eyes hollow from nights without sleep. She'd stopped wearing her rosary. It hung now from her wrist, tarnished, its once golden beads blackened by time and promethium smoke. "Every transmission still carries it," she said quietly. "The hymn hasn't slowed. Forge worlds hum it in binary. Hive choirs sing it in dreams. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus claims it's a form of divine data." "And Terra?" I asked. Her lips trembled. "They've gone silent. That word, silent, landed like a blade between us. For the first time in millennia, the heart of the Imperium no longer spoke. The Astronomican's beam still burned, but no one could read its rhythm. Some claimed the Emperor had withdrawn into deeper thought. Others whispered that his dream had turned inward, consuming itself. "We have to go back," Mara said suddenly. "If this spreads without control, it already has." She turned to me. "Then stop it." "I can't. You started it." "No," I said softly. "He did." She stared at me as if I'd confessed to murder. Maybe I had. Because what I'd unleashed was no longer a song. It was a language, one the galaxy had been waiting to remember. Worlds that had never shared faith now prayed in synchrony. The Ordos called it the Echo Heresy, but the name meant nothing. It was bigger than any decree. I walked to the central hololith, its surface shimmering with the light of 1,000 signals. I could see them all, planets flickering like votive candles, some bright, some fading. On one world, a cardinal's sermon ended in a chorus that wasn't his own. On another, soldiers halted mid-battle as the enemy began to sing with them. Armies died standing in harmony, their final act an unspoken surrender to something neither side understood. Mara watched the images with quiet horror. "This isn't salvation, Kael. It's contagion." "Maybe they're the same thing," I said. "You're talking like him. Maybe I'm listening like him." She turned away, gripping the edge of the viewport. "If this is what he wanted, then he's no savior. He's a virus wearing a crown." Her words should have felt like blasphemy. Instead, they felt like truth. Because the more the hymn spread, the more I sensed what it was doing, remembering. Not inventing, not commanding, but recalling what humanity once was before faith turned to fear. That was what terrified me most. It wasn't destroying the Imperium. It was revealing it. I dreamt again that night. I stood before the Golden Throne, only it wasn't gold anymore. It was stone, cracked and veined with light. The figure seated upon it was not the Emperor, not entirely. His body flickered between flesh and fire, between man and machine. Around him angels of bone and iron sang in silence, their mouths open but voiceless. "You carry my echo," he said. His voice was both whisper and thunder. "What you call faith was never obedience. It was memory." "Memory of what?" I asked. "Of what it meant to be alive." When I woke, the ship's alarms were already screaming. The Astronomican's pulse had spiked across the void, its rhythm accelerating, deepening, as if the throne itself had drawn a new breath. The hololith flared with new transmissions. Chaos across the segmentums. Cardinals proclaiming revelation. Tech priests falling to their knees before machines that now wept oil like blood. Entire regiments deserting the Astra Militarum to form something called the Choir of the Living Emperor. Mara rushed in, her face pale. "They're fighting on Mars," she said. "The Mechanicus has split. Half claim the machine god has awakened within the Emperor's dream. The other half are calling for total purgation. The galaxy was unraveling, not through war, but through awakening." Every belief that had sustained humanity was being rewritten in real time. The hymn had become scripture, its melody replacing doctrine. "We need to choose," Mara said. "Either we stop it or we help it finish what it started." I stared at the viewport. Through it, I could see the warp itself shifting, colors bending in golden spirals. The hymn had reached even there. The darkness was learning to hum. "What if it can't be stopped?" I asked. "Then we end it." "How?" "By ending you." The words hit like a bolt shell. For a moment I thought I'd misheard her. But the pistol in her hand was steady. Her eyes, though rimmed with exhaustion, were clear. "You're its vessel, Kael," she said. "It uses your mind. If you die, maybe it dies with you." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it just finds another voice." "Don't make me do this." "I'm not." She hesitated, tears cutting through the ash on her cheeks. The ship's lights flickered again, bathing us in gold. The hymn was rising, echoing through the hull, through my veins, through her trembling hands. "Listen," I whispered. "Do you hear it?" She shook her head. "I hear everything dying." "No," I said. "You hear everything remembering." The pistol fired. The light consumed me before the pain could. There was no sound at first. No pain, just weightless white stretching into forever. The kind of silence that makes you realize you still exist, because it refuses to let you vanish. Then the light bent. It folded around me like cloth, shimmering with faint gold threads. When I reached out, my fingers left ripples in it. Every ripple sang, a note soft as breath but alive. I recognized it, the hymn. the same rhythm that had haunted the Imperium, now beating not around me, but through me. I wasn't dead. Not exactly. When the light cleared, I stood on a plain of ash beneath a sky carved from fire. The horizon burned with the faint silhouette of cathedrals, monuments both ruined and reborn. In their spires, faces flickered, saints, soldiers, martyrs, every soul the Imperium had ever demanded, glowing faintly like embers refusing to die. And at the center of it all sat the throne. It was smaller here, human in scale, forged from bone and brass. Upon it sat no corpse, no god, only a man, robed in the plain linen of a soldier long forgotten. His face was lined and weary, his eyes the color of burned gold. When he looked at me, I understood why the galaxy called him emperor. Not because he ruled it, but because he remembered all of it. Kael Verity, he said, and my name broke across the plain like thunder. You came to me through faith and through doubt. I fell to my knees. My lord, I whispered. Am I dead? He smiled, the smallest gesture of sorrow. Not yet. Death is only the end of motion. You still move. I tried to stop it, I said. The song, it's spreading. It's tearing the Imperium apart. It is mending what was already broken. By destroying it. By making it honest. His gaze drifted upward, toward the burning skyline. For 10,000 years, I have dreamed in silence. My voice became obedience. My light became law. And yet, law without love is only machine. You gave them memory again. You reminded them why they believed. I didn't mean to. That is why it worked. He rose from the throne. When his feet touched the ash, the ground bloomed faintly with gold. The song is not mine alone, he said. It was never mine to keep. It belongs to those who listen. And if they turn it to war, they will, he said. For a while. But even war must listen when enough voices sing. I felt something then, a pull behind me, deep and rhythmic. The pulse of the living world, calling me back. I turned, and in the distance I saw Mara kneeling beside my body. Her hand was pressed to my chest. Tears streaked her face as she whispered my name again and again, as if the sound itself could hold me. She killed me, I said. She tried to save what she could understand. The Emperor answered, That is not sin. That is love. The horizon rippled. I could see fragments of reality bleeding into this place. Worlds burning, others singing, others simply waiting. The hymn threaded through them all, golden and infinite, the pulse of existence itself. I can't control it, I said. No one can. You are not meant to control it. Then why show me this? So you can choose how it ends. He extended his hand, and two paths appeared before me. To my left, silence, a world where the hymn would fade. The Imperium would survive in its cold perfection, its faith unbroken, because it would never again be tested. To my right, fire, a universe remade through memory, raw and human, where belief would fracture but grow, where every voice could sing even if none agreed. Silence preserves, he said. Song transforms. Neither is mercy. My throat burned. And if I refuse both? He looked almost amused. Then the galaxy will keep dreaming without you. But dreams unattended tend to rot. I looked again at Mara's face through the veil of light. She had stopped whispering now. Her head was bowed, her lips trembling in prayer. I thought of her voice, of the vault, of the sisters who had burned to keep the light alive. They hadn't prayed for perfection. They'd prayed to matter. I took a step toward the fire. The air shook. The Emperor watched, expression unreadable. Do you forgive us? I asked. He tilted his head. You still think forgiveness is mine to give? And then he smiled, a quiet, human smile. Go, Kael Verity. Teach them to listen. The light broke open. The first thing I felt was breath, air filling my lungs like a flood. I gasped, coughing, and the taste of metal and ozone filled my mouth. The deck was cold beneath me. The ship was dark except for the faint golden glow crawling through the seams of the hull. Mara stared at me, eyes wide, pistol forgotten in her lap. Kael? I reached for her hand. He dreams, I whispered. And now so do we. The vox crackled. Across 1,000 frequencies, the same melody echoed. Not command, not worship, but recognition. The Astronomicon flared one last time, its beam fracturing into countless threads of light that spread through the stars like veins of living fire. For the first time in human history, the galaxy didn't kneel. It listened. Mara rose beside me, her hand trembling. "What happens now?" "Now?" I said, watching the light spread. "Now we learn to sing." The hymn swelled once more, fierce, imperfect, infinite, and the stars answered, each a note in the endless choir of the Emperor's dream. The light reached us, warm and terrible, and then the universe began again.